Analyst Arthur Kaplan. He is the director of the Medical Ethics Division at NYU's Langone Medical Center. And Sanjay, I want to start with you just on the facts from a public health perspective. How close is the United States? How close is this country to being able to end this policy of social distancing?
Well, sadly, John, I don't think we're really anywhere close to that right now. I mean, there's several reasons why. We can look around the world and see what has happened in other places around the world, both places that have had still having difficulty controlling this and places that have had success, and see what they've done. The social distancing plans have been several weeks, not a couple weeks like this. But also, John, I think it's worth pointing out something that we talked about yesterday, and that is that when we're looking at these numbers going up, they're giving us a reflection of the exposures from probably 10 to 14 days ago. It takes a while from the time of exposure to someone develops symptoms, and then a few days after that before they can get a test result. So the point is that over the last 10 to 14 days, there's clearly been more spread of this virus around the country. So the numbers that you just showed will continue to go up. So if anything, not only are the numbers going up, but the pace at which the numbers are going up as well. They have more inertia, John. So at that point, pulling back on the social distancing makes no sense. It's something that's moving faster and gaining more speed as it does. So that flattening the curve graph there is what this is all about, John. I mean, it's a point, again, that I think people are starting to come to understand. But ultimately, it is sort of acknowledged that a lot of people will be exposed to this virus. It's really about the pace at which they're exposed to this virus so that the hospital systems are not overwhelmed. Now is not the time to pull back. And just about every public health expert that I've spoken to has said that. At least they're telling me, if they're not always saying it out loud publicly.
Dr. Kaplan, Art, it seems to me this is the type of thing you could teach or probably have been teaching in your medical ethics class for decades. But if you have a question of the economy versus public health, what's the risk of that framing?
Well, if you put the economy ahead of public health and then you have people dropping like flies from the pandemic, you're going to ruin the economy anyway. There's no choice about this. It's got to lean toward public health. We have to tamp down the pandemic, as Sanjay said. We're 2 weeks behind where the virus is. So when the president starts talking about we're going to open up for business, not only are we arguing about, are we going to wait 15 days and then go back to normal, he's undermining the efforts to keep people socially distant now, because what they hear is, well, we got to open up the economy, or maybe the social distancing doesn't matter so much. So morally, it's public health over the economy in the short run.
What about the comparison that the president made, and others have made it too, and I want to play it for you right now, comparing this pandemic to car accidents? Listen.
We have a very active flu season, more active than most. It's looking like it's heading to 50,000 or more deaths. And you look at automobile accidents, which are far greater than any numbers we're talking about. That doesn't mean we're going to tell everybody no more driving of cars.
So, Dr. Kaplan, what about that comparison?
I think it's a false comparison. The car accidents, while horrible, don't overwhelm the healthcare system. The flu, while terrible, this coronavirus is much nastier, more virulent, more deadly. So it's just not the right way to look at this. What you want to do is say, if you don't want hundreds of thousands of deaths on your hand, keep the only tool we've got, social distancing. And I should add, if we want to try and open the economy up faster, Trump and the White House keep telling us that tests are available and we can get everybody tested. Well, South Korea has shown us that you can sort of go back to a more normal economy if you can test everyone, because then you know who to isolate, then you know who really needs to self-quarantine once you start identifying people who are sick or infected. But where are the tests?
We also missed that opportunity to a certain extent. We didn't test people when maybe mass testing could have made a difference. Sanjay, another big development overnight, and I just don't want to lose sight of this because I live in New York City, among other things. I want to play what Dr. Deborah Birx had to say about the attack rate, about just the extent to which this city that I'm in right now is becoming infected. Listen.
The New York metro area of New Jersey, New York City, and parts of Long Island have an attack rate close to 1 in 1,000. This is 5 times what the other areas are seeing. Through the high-throughput lab investigations, we're finding that 28% of the submitted specimens are positive from that area, where it's less than 8% in the rest of the country. So to all of my friends and colleagues in New York, this is the group that needs to absolutely social distance and self-isolate at this time. Clearly, the virus had been circulating there for a number of weeks to have this level of penetrance into the general community.
First of all, the just very phrase attack rate is something that's a little bit disquieting. Secondly, what's the significance of this, Sanjay? Especially because Andrew Cuomo, the governor, said a little bit later that the number of cases may be doubling every 2 days here.
Yeah, well, I mean, this is not surprising. I think if you look at what has been happening in New York City and the fact that the virus has likely been circulating there for some time. But John, you know, I think that this is happening in other communities around the country as well. New York is testing more. It is a dense city. There's public transportation. There's all sorts of different reasons for the virus to be circulating more robustly. But I do think that there's so many communities around the country where this virus is circulating. It has to be. I mean, other places where there's international airports. We know in Washington State the virus was clearly circulating there for a long time. There's a lot of cases there. But I think some of this is reflective of the testing, and some of this, as Professor Kaplan was just talking about, the fact that we are just behind the curve in many of these other communities. So once we start testing and getting up to speed, you know, I mean, again, I take no joy in saying this stuff, but the reality is that we're going to see evidence of more community spread in more communities around the country, I think, over the next couple of weeks.
And just one thing Sanjay has pointed out is look at Hong Kong, a place where the case level had been relatively flat. They opened up society a little bit, and now the number of cases over the last few days has gone back up again. That could be the risk of this type of thing. Dr. Kaplan, this does raise, and I don't want people to think this isn't a complicated discussion, and people shouldn't underestimate the role that the economy and overall well-being plays in daily life, but it gets to a very, very heady debate, which is what is the value? How do you place a value on a human life?
Well, people do. The U.S. government does. The military does. As crude and crass as it may seem, we have measures that economists love to say, you know, a human life is worth about $9 million in this setting, et cetera, et cetera. And when the economy goes south, there's no doubt that people not being able to eat, crime goes up. You can imagine social repercussions. But let's get real here. We're talking about trying to stick with this 30 days, not 15 days, then taking the temperature of where things are with the virus around the country to start undermining that, our best weapon right now for fear of, you know, where the economy's going. I keep thinking to myself, when the CEO is ready to take the subway to work or a bus to work and then operate the elevator in their company, I'm going to get some sense that they think it's safe enough to end social distancing, and I don't think we're there yet.
Sanjay, you want to talk about Hong Kong briefly so people understand what happened there?
Yeah, I mean, look, this was the model that a lot of people were holding up. They had a relatively low case volume of confirmed cases. And then, you know, the sense was a little bit of complacency. You could take the foot off the gas a little bit, and within a few days, you saw the number of cases double. Like many of those cases, to be fair, were cases that were imported, you know, coming from other countries and then starting to circulate within Hong Kong again. But I think, look, you don't have to look throughout history, but you can just look around the world right now to see what happens if you start to pull back on some of these measures. I mean, I worry that, we could have the worst of both worlds in the sense that the numbers start to go up again significantly, as they already are, and we don't have any benefits to the economy that people are trying to balance this with, because, you know, we'll be dealing with this for a much longer time at a higher volume. So Hong Kong is a cautionary tale. People should read about what's happened in Hong Kong, understand that, and it might give a better sense of what to try and avoid here.
Dr. Gupta, Dr. Kaplan, thank you for being with us this morning. Really appreciate the time to talk this through. This morning, the president is making statements about how hard it is to buy masks and ventilators on the global market. But there is action he can take now to speed up manufacturing.